In most games of Magic, you try to take away your opponent's various resources. But with this deck, you're trying to give some of them back. Hello folks, I'm the Pauper Guy, and today I'm going to talk about a deck I call Existence is Overrated. This is a white-black control deck that uses exile mechanics in combination with Eldrazi de-exiling mechanics to do some interesting things. First, let's take a look at our two Eldrazi cards that use this weird mechanic. Mind Raker is a 3/3 creature for 3 and a black mana, but is colorless because it has the Devoid ability. When it comes into play, you may move a card an opponent owns that is in exile into their graveyard. If you do, your opponent must discard a card. This makes Mind Raker a bigger version of Ravenous Rats. We also run Ruin Processor, a colorless 7/8 creature for 7 mana. When you cast Ruin Processor, you may move a card an opponent owns in exile into their graveyard, similar to Mind Raker, and if you do, you gain 5 life. These creatures are kinda big and expensive, so why are we playing them? The answer is, they work particularly well with Journey to Nowhere. Journey to Nowhere is a white 2-mana enchantment. When it comes into play, you exile a target creature. If it leaves play, the exiled creature will come back. But, if the exiled creature is no longer exiled, then it can't come back into play, and will stay wherever it's moved on to. Alongside Journey, we run Chainer's Edict, which is my favorite piece of removal, and probably my favorite card in all of Pauper. Chainer's Edict is a black sorcery for 2 mana that has target player sacrifice a creature, which gets around every single type of protection and hexproof in the format. The only hitch is that your opponent gets to select the creature, so if they have a second creature or a token they don't care about, it's not as strong. In addition, Chainer's Edict can be flashed back for 7 mana, which is not easy to get to, but is very possible when you're playing a control deck. These two cards might be the strongest removal in all of Pauper, and we get to play both. In addition, we play Unmake, a white and black instant for 3 mana that exiles target creature. I almost didn't include Unmake in this deck, despite it being perfect for our theme and mechanics, because it's 3 mana, and I didn't think it was needed. But in my initial testing, I found that having 0 instant speed removal can be a real weakness, and the deck didn't seem to quite have enough removal overall. So we play a Journey to Nowhere, and then send the exiled creature to its owner's graveyard. But then what? The answer is Kor Skyfisher, a white 2/3 creature with flying for 2 mana. When it comes into play, you must return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. This is meant to offset the incredible stats this card has for 2 mana, but this and many other decks have found ways of turning this into an upside. In our case, we can pick up a Journey to Nowhere that is no longer holding a creature in exile so that we can play it again. In a pinch, we can also return one of the other ETB creatures and replay them to get their effect again. If you don't have a land to play for turn, you can always pick up a tapped land and replay it to get a mana back. There are also a few ETB lands you might want to replay, but we'll get to that later. Since we can't run more than 4 copies of Kor Skyfisher, we also run some Aviary Mechanic, a 2/2 white creature for 2 mana that allows you to pick up a permanent you control when it comes into play, but only if you want to. Thraben Inspector is a decent white 1/2 creature for 1 mana that makes a clue token when it comes into play. You can pay 2 mana and sacrifice a clue token to draw a card, meaning that Thraben Inspector can replace itself, but you don't have to spend the mana up front. Alternatively, if you're trying to play at a faster tempo to pressure your opponent, a clue token allows you to bounce something with Kor Skyfisher that isn't another creature or land that you would rather keep in play. We run just 1 copy of Underworld Charger, a black 3/3 creature for 3 mana that can't block. It can be brought back into play from your graveyard by paying 5 mana and exiling 3 other cards, and when it does, it comes back as a 5/5 that still can't block. This is a decent recurring threat that doesn't help our control plan at all, but is a win condition that can be hard for other decks to permanently get rid of. Castigate is a white and black sorcery for 2 mana that has you look at your opponent's hand and exile 1 non-land card from it. It isn't really being played because it exiles a card, but rather because it's a strong piece of control and we have access to it in our colors. Our last main board spell is Night's Whisper, which is a simple black sorcery for 2 mana that has you lose 2 life and draw 2 cards. This is decently priced card advantage, and this deck has plenty of ways to gain life back, so paying a couple shouldn't be a worry. In the mana base, we run 4 main deck Bojuka Bog. This is a land that comes into play tapped, produces 1 black mana, and when it comes into play, exiles a player's graveyard. This card is often seen as a 1 or 2 of in mid-range and control decks that want to interfere with control and combo decks that utilize their graveyards. In our case, it helps in control mirrors, but more importantly provides plenty of cards for Mind Raker and Rune Processor to return to your opponent's graveyards and get their full effects. We play a few Radiant Fountains to help keep our life total up and to provide a decent bounce target for the 4 copies of Orzhov Basilica we run. Kor Skyfisher can sometimes bounce Radiant Fountain as well when it's needed, and Orzhov Basilica ensures that we have a good chance of reaching 7 or more mana and allows us to get our ETB effects from our lands multiple times. This deck is still very experimental, but it's showing more promise than I initially expected. Mind Raker and Rune Processor are not the most impressive cards to build a deck around, but they're solid ETB creatures, and they work well with a large pile of the format's stronger control cards in black and white. I haven't gotten to test this deck very much, but it's been fun to play so far. That's it for today. Thanks for watching! Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more Magic the Gathering Pauper content.